Hi everyone, and welcome back to Blame It on Marketing with Emma and Ruta. We will get our special guest Beth to introduce herself in just a sec, but this week's episode is about women in marketing. Comes with a slight trigger warning. I'm already triggered just even starting this episode out the gate. We've done some research as well that kind of goes alongside this, so maybe we can publish this in the notes as well, Ruta. But yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. So if you don't want to listen to us have a feminist rant, you can click to the next episode right now. Anyway, without further ado, Beth, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks for having me, both of you as well today. I'm Beth. I'm head of business development at an agency called Digital Loft. We have got offices across the UK, but mainly in the Lake District, which is where I'm based, which is very lovely. Manchester and London as well, but obviously we have loads of people all over the place, like many businesses do these days. But yeah, at the agency, I'm responsible for all of our new business, all of our marketing, and I also am heavily involved in our client services as well. So I have a bit of a dual role in that I'm on both sides of sales and marketing, so I have to fight both corners, I guess. But yeah, that's me.
Wonderful. Thank you for coming on. I know it's an intimidating topic to talk about, to say the least. Me and Emma haven't covered it yet. We've kind of like sprinkled stuff here and there. I think people kind of know what to expect from our take on things. But before we dive into the episode, by the way, Emma, that was the most aggressive intro we've ever done in our lives. I love it. Before we jump into the main topic,
this is the energy of
the
podcast.
It's fun. This is it. Should we make another podcast called Blame It on the Woman?
That was like the OG podcast before podcast.
Yeah, literally. So before we jump into talking about women in marketing, we would love to ask you to tell us about one of your deepest, darkest fuck-ups in marketing and what happened.
This makes me laugh so much. I didn't even have to think about this because this one always pops into my head, and it's from when I was really junior. And a bit of background, I started out in paid media doing PPC and paid social. And I remember once I was at an old agency, was doing these social ads for a very posh boarding school. And my colleague, who is a dear friend of mine now, so if she listens to this, she'll absolutely remember this. But she left me these ads to set up in her absence because she was on holiday. But I can't remember if she forgot to tell me or I forgot to read her handover. Didn't realise that we were waiting for the designs back for the actual ad contents. Like, the copy was great, talking about how prestigious this boarding school was, blah, blah, blah. And then I was just like, cool, like the ads are ready to go live. All I thought she wanted me to do was push them live. Forgot to check the designs, forgot to check what the image was. And this is like very kind of prehistoric Facebook ad, so it wasn't as like complex as it is now. So this boarding school just had this placeholder image running on their ads for about 2 days of a cat in a Christmas hat. And I just
at least it was that. Okay, deep breath, everyone. So we're going to get into our main topic now. Oh, that's it. So, ladies, this is obviously an open forum, so we're all gonna pitch in where we've got stories and things to talk about here. But Beth, I'll come to you first. What is it like being a woman working in marketing? And do you feel like your gender has ever kind of been used against you in the context of your job?
The short answer to the second part of that question is yes. And I think like any woman probably in any private business would agree with that. And if you don't, then you're incredibly lucky. And I'd really love to know how you've gotten to that point. I would say I think being a woman in marketing is better than it used to be. Especially like from my perspective, being in the world of kind of business development, which is largely a very male dominated world anyway. Definitely better than it used to be. But obviously it's one of those things, isn't it, where there's still lots of work to be done. And I think sometimes like women and men get wrapped up in this idea that women have come so far, forgetting that, it's not the end. We're not at that tip of where we should be at. And yeah, it definitely held against me. I've worked in very kind of white corporate environments before that have been dominated by men. I've been the only woman in senior meetings on many occasions, and I think it's almost one of those unspoken things, like even if it's not being made apparent, you feel it as a woman, you feel it as being the only woman in those environments, and it's something that's really kind of like subconscious that hangs in the air. But I think, like, to use examples, I was quite lucky in the sense in my career that I got to quite a senior position quite quickly, but that still came with its drawbacks in the sense that not only was I female, but I was also a female under 30. I'm not a female under 30 anymore. I wish I was. But I remember comments like, if someone went on maternity leave, the men in the room would be very openly saying, "Oh, it'll be you next, Beth," and things like that. And it wasn't a conversation about my ability or anything like that. It was just a given that as a woman, my next step would not be about progression in my career or my next step professionally. It was like, oh, settling down and having kids, that'll be the thing for you, and that was only 5 or so years ago, and I can't imagine a man saying that to me now. And now I'm now in a position where I am married, I'm settling down and everything, but I can't imagine a world where a man would say that directly to my face anymore. So I guess that shows how quickly things do change. But yeah, it's definitely something that has been very openly used against me, I would say.
Yep. Yeah. I can't relate more if I tried. I'm the same. I got quite senior quite young, and it was a very odd feeling being one, the youngest person, and then also the female in the room. Luckily, I'm 6 foot and quite dominating, so in some ways I think it's easier for me. But if you have a different personality to that, even if you are super capable and super good at your job, it's so easy to get passed by because people just think, oh, you're just the lovely marketing blah blah or whatever it is. So yeah, I totally relate to that. It's funny you gave the example of the maternity leave, because I very recently, like in the last year, have been called emotional on a phone call, and they meant it as in emotional. And I called the person out afterwards, and they were like, oh, I don't mean it in a bad way, I mean like passionate. And I was like, then why didn't you use that word? Yeah. Also, by the way, I was emotional in that phone call, but because shit was batshit crazy, and I should have been everyone should have been emotional and not pretending like what's happening is not what's happening. So like, I don't think there's anything, by the way, wrong with emotion. It's just
no,
that typical.
I think that
also,
is
by
part
the way,
of. Sorry, ladies. I think that's part of the problem, right? Is that it's like especially with things like that, what you're talking about there, the context of using words like you're being emotional. Emotional's good. Women generally have higher emotional intelligence than men, so to be called emotional to me is a positive. But it's when it's used against you in a negative way that it becomes this thing. And I think that's where people are like, we're not being sexist. But if you turn something that is supposed to be like a female trait into something negative, that's where you are being sexist. So I think I'm just clearing that up for anyone who's listening, going, no, that could be a positive. It's like, no, it's where you do that. That's where it kicks in.
It doesn't work the other way around. Being aggressive and being strong are typically male traits. And I've been in meetings where men have gotten overly angry and stormed out, or I mean, I personally don't mind swearing at work, but swearing in a certain way and things like that. I've never heard a man be called out on that in the workplace, because
I wanted to say that men are fucking hysterical. Like, they are, if they are fucking hysterical. They are more emotional than most women. They just don't know how to deal with their emotions. Plus, they have the emotional range of a fucking teaspoon. Like, not to quote Harry Potter, but not well. The books. It's Hermione. Yeah. So when we get called emotional, it's like, yeah, but like, weren't you fucking and swearing and God knows whating, the
Banging your
last time your
hands on the
laptop didn't
table.
work, like,
Yeah.
But
yeah,
that,
that's
like,
passionate, isn't it? Like men get described as
yeah,
passionate in that. So
yeah.
it's one rule for one, for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, we definitely all feel like we've been that. I think in particular as well, I think Beth, to pick up on your point, which is the more senior you get, the more often as a woman you find yourself alone in meetings with groups of men. And in a similar vein to the two of you, did quite well, quite young, have gotten into meetings and basically had to tell everybody that they're being stupid and wrong because they're not looking at the data, and having to be quite forceful at times, and having people make comments like, all sorts of things like, she's being really aggressive, or she's being a bitch, or she's being like, Emma, why are you so difficult? That's the one that I've heard a lot. You're being really difficult. And I'm like, am I being difficult, or am I just telling you what you don't want to hear? I think if you hear that from some of your male colleagues, like I can't remember a time where I've sat in a meeting where a guy's been saying, here's the data, here's the evidence to something, and being told that they're being difficult. So I think it's those sorts of things. And I think, when you're more junior, some of the things that happen are, I mean, they're a range, right? Not everything is like super, super extreme. There have been some things in my career that have happened that have been quite extreme. And, like old school companies, like, sort of like what you were talking about, Beth, where the company's not dealt with it, where I have actually raised my hand and said, I don't like the way that went down with that person, and it's not been handled. Whereas now I like to think lots of those things would not occur in the workplace, full stop, which is great. But it's this sort of like undercurrent that exists still that I kind of really struggle with, that like the use of language that's like, yeah, picking up on you being a woman, or even just the way that people complain about people going on mat leave, or the fact that you work for businesses where they're like, oh, she's getting a bit difficult, and the connotation is like, oh, is she on the menopause? Is she on her period? Those kind of like just undertones of things that are said about women in the background. And so I guess like one of the things I wonder, like, why do we think, so obviously these things are not exclusive to marketers, but like I say, quite often in our little research pack, we've discovered that 62% of marketers are women. Fantastic. So there's lots of us, which is awesome. But what we've also discovered is most of the people who are being paid more, because we've looked into the kind of gender pay gap information that is published online, most of the time women are earning less than men. So there is a kind of a sense that maybe men are in more senior positions than us, which sucks. So why do we think that is happening to women in marketing? And what do you think that actually means for businesses?
So when I was thinking about this one, for some reason in my head, I just had like Mad Men and Don Draper pop into my head. And I think and I just kind of wonder, does it all stem, not all of it, does it largely stem back to the fact that, marketing, advertising, this kind of world that we operate in completely originated as a very male dominated, most private businesses did, but famously the world of advertising was this heavily male corporate world, that was dominated by men in suits telling other people what to do, telling women what to do, and those people getting that progression and kind of pushing the industry forward. I don't know if that's the case or not. It's just that's the immediate thing that popped into my mind. And I think when you've got legacies like that in place, it's really hard to step away from them sometimes, even with all the work that goes on in terms of breaking down barriers and empowering women in the workplace.
I was actually thinking about the same thing when we were talking about marketing in general earlier. But I think there's an interesting paradox that happens as well, which is that there are a lot of women in marketing. So marketing tends to be a career that draws in the creatives, the writers, the designers, the organizers, like all quite, feminine aligned, usually interests, not for everyone, but we're good at that shit. And sometimes those are seen as like not weak skills, but like nice skills, It's soft skills. That's a good word. Which is hilarious because it is an industry created by men, right? So it's like, back in the day, like if you did watch Mad Men, it was like a huge moment for one of the secretaries to become a copywriter, because copywriting was a man's only job, and it doesn't feel like that's the case anymore. So it's interesting that we're still not in as many senior positions, but there's lots of us. But also marketing and HR in terms of the C-suite tend to be the like token women roles. If you do need more women in the C-suite, it'll be marketing and HR usually that end up being those. So it's both like an accepted and a not accepted, but it's kind of like gray and weird. Like I don't know how to like wrap my mind around it.
Accepted until you get to a certain level, and then we need a man to step in and do the job, basically.
Yeah. Or like you're the token female senior leader and we take you seriously, but it's
But you're still marketing.
Yeah.
But you're still marketing.
I was when I was a director at an agency when I was quite young, and in that position I remember I got put forward for like this minority award, I would call it. And this was a big global company, there's people from everywhere around the world, and in places like America where there is a huge demographic of people working for this agency, lots of minorities. I was one of the people who like won this, like it was like a scholarship thing, I would call it, purely because I was a woman. Like that was a minority, and there was that thing that was like, well, it's great that they're recognizing that women still are minorities in the world of business and the world of marketing, but at the same time it's like, why, and why is our industry still so dominated by men at that level that this white woman is still considered a minority? I mean, obviously you'd want to get to no minorities, but
yeah, it's all work in progress, right? And I think, like you say, we've come so far, but I think again, I feel like every time we get to that point where we go, we've come so far, you now have to keep pushing. You've got to keep pushing, otherwise this stuff does not happen. Change doesn't happen if you don't keep pushing, which again is why it's so important that we have this kind of discussion. I think the thing that I still find it very disappointing when businesses, obviously naturally in lots of companies, women do go off and have children, they set up families, and therefore there is sometimes a career break involved in that sort of thing. And I think quite often when you look at the demographic information, it's really disappointing to see that quite clearly what is still happening is women in marketing who are going and having families are still held back in their career. So they come back or they can't progress because they've had a child, and then they take on the childcare stuff. And part of me thinks that's what's happened, is that I don't know that it's necessarily this like, I don't think these things happen necessarily particularly consciously, that we're like, oh, there's loads of women in marketing and we're gonna stop them sitting on the C-suite. I think it's more like, because of the nature of the fact that there's so many women in marketing, things that happen to women's issues are more likely to stop us progressing in our careers, and the businesses that we work for are not set up to actually support women, because the C-suite are a bunch of bloody men. So they're not doing things like giving women really good maternity maternity and childcare flexibility. They're not giving women leave when they've got menopause or whatever it might be, all of those things that impact women. So I think businesses, for me, it's like, actually, I think businesses need to sort their shit out. Because if you do, and we'll get onto this bit in a minute, but you do need diversity of thought in businesses in order for businesses to actually perform better. So you do need women sitting at your top table, and not tokenistically, you need, the best people for the job sitting up there. And the only way you do that is if you create policies that are good for everybody.
Yeah. And I think that as well, that's something that has to come from women as well. So I just want to say as well, Digital Loft are really good when it comes to being a woman in the workplace. Our leadership team we have one man on our leadership team now, basically. We do have things, like an enhanced maternity, and we've introduced new policies around menopause and periods and things like that, so that we're super transparent about all that stuff. But that's because we've got women in a leadership role who are actually willing to make those changes and be very forthright in doing so as well. And I think, again, probably we'll come into when we talk about diversity of thought and things like that. But I just think it's really important that as women, when we get to these senior positions, we don't just think, woo, I've made it, that's it now. Like, look at me being a strong, independent woman. It's then on us to make it better for other people as well. And have the balls to kind of say, this isn't good enough, we need to change it. Even if 10 other men that are on this board don't agree with it and it's not going to affect your life, it's still so imperative.
Yeah. I feel like the best example of that is maternity, paternity leave. Like, I think it's absolutely wild, the fact that, men at best get 2 weeks for paternity leave, excuse me. Like, what, you think they don't love their children as much? They don't want to, like, be around their kid? They don't want to bond with their child? Like, what? Like, I don't understand. Like, I don't know, countries like Sweden have solved it, and they do, like, shared, so both people can take time off and blah blah blah. But like, that's one of those policies where, like, it's kind of a women-led issue, because we get really negatively affected by being on maternity leave in terms of our careers, but actually men suffer just as much because of it, because they don't get to be with their kid for a year after they're born, and that's given that everything goes okay and your wife isn't, in bed from surgery and recovering or whatever the hell else happens. So yeah, I totally agree about having to push for better. We spoke about the kind of underlying gender norms, aka women going off and having babies, which impacts careers in a very obviously physical way, because you're not there, you're not, part of the room, you're not blah blah blah. But what I found interesting is that when we look at the research that Emma did around podcasts, in general, podcasts are a super male space if we take just the general world, but also in marketing. So I think, Emma, you looked at like the top 15 marketing podcasts, and 3 of them were run by women, which is interesting, because that isn't a place where maybe necessarily being a mother, I guess it can in terms of how much time you have, but it isn't like directly impactful. So is it just that women aren't taken as seriously? Like, when we give advice on a podcast, that's not as good as if a man gave the same advice. What do you guys think?
I wonder if it's down to the self-doubt that a lot of women harbour. I think men have, and I mean this as a compliment to men as well, I think a lot of men are a lot more comfortable with just putting themselves out there, because the male community generally seems to be one of support and championing one another, and that's something that women, we've not quite got there yet. Even though we're all talking about female empowerment and everything, there is still a lot of women hating on women, and that competitiveness that comes with being a woman in business as well, I think. And I think that could have something to do with it, not having that confidence to just be like, you know what, I'm going to try it, and if it doesn't work, fuck it, I've not lost anything. But instead it's like, oh shit, if I try this, am I going to be cancelled? Am I going to say something, or is no one going to listen to it at all? And it'll just be like, like, I guess to compare it to like trad wife stuff, it's like, if you're going to host a party and nobody comes, we hate that as women, so is it that stage now into people's heads.
I think that also your point, Beth, about women hating other women, because this is something that I think, in particular in my career, I've suffered a lot from. Like there were like key moments in my career where I have been held back by other women, and that is because I think there is this feeling that if they clear the path for me, I've had it easy, and why shouldn't I suffer kind of the same way that they have? And that's been so detrimental just to me. And also, like, you know, for years I would have said that I'm anti-feminist and all this kind of stuff because of that, because I'm like, well, how can you treat other women like that? I don't understand. That's not how I treat other women. I kind of get it. And I think the creator space is similar. It's almost a little bit like, I don't want to listen to people don't want to listen to women talking about marketing, perhaps because it's a little bit like admitting that we are as good as each other, which some women don't want to do. Whereas I don't know whether men have that same feeling about each other. Don't get me wrong. I'm not blaming women for hating on other women. I think quite a lot of that is structural sexism that kind of stems from men pitting women against each other and kind of treating us in a certain way in the workplace in particular. So I don't blame women for that. But I do think you can obviously be conscious and you can be introspective and you can be like, actually, am I being a dick? Or am I helping this person push forward? And shouldn't I be pleased that other women don't have to suffer what I have to suffer in the workplace? And I think, yeah, the podcast thing to me smacks of that. It's a little bit like, am I going to listen to Emma and Ruta? Well, no, because maybe I feel like they're competitors of mine. And I'm like, well, no, no. So yeah, I think that for me, that plays into a big part of it. That whole, like, yeah, the sexism that is bred by us putting ourselves against each other, which is so weird.
I think we've had it ingrained into us that the space for us is so small and that we can't all fit in that space. And I think that's where it comes from. You know, there's only room for 4 female hosted podcasts or whatever that number was. So there's no point in me trying to do that as well, you know.
Yeah. Women in size and space is just a whole other problem. It's always smaller, it's always lesser, it's always trying to like shrink yourself so you're not seen. Like that's the normal standards. Like we can't take up space, right? If we do, then it's always seen in like not always, excuse me, it can be seen in a negative way, kind of the words that are attributed to it, which is fascinating. Even down to our body size.
Well, yeah,
filters all the way through.
All of us, just somehow, basically, it's like, you know, in Barbie, America Ferrera has that
Smaller
speech,
is
and
better.
you're like, it really doesn't matter what you do, you're fucked. The other thing that I thought was really interesting about the podcasts when I was looking at them, so obviously there was the fact that there's top 15, there's only 4 female hosts of the top 15 marketing podcasts globally as well, not just UK. This is a global issue. And also the top performing female podcast episodes are all about us women talking about being a woman in marketing. So there are all these female marketers listening to these podcasts about being a woman marketer, frustrated, going, oh, it's so frustrating being a female marketer. But then also apparently also listening to all these guys and their advice, which I'm not saying that they don't have good marketing advice. I think, you know, just to be conscious about who it is you're listening to and why. You know, you can ask yourself those questions. I think that's good. And the other thing, yeah, there's just so many. I get frustrated by this. I don't know if you two do as well, because it sort of goes back to your point, Beth, about the award, which was that, like, women in marketing, women in tech, women in this, women in that. Like, we have to have those things. And I recognize we need them because otherwise, you know, we kind of get forgotten about. But also, like, do we also really still need them? I mean, I guess I know we do, but it's frustrating.
I think that was my point, is that I was up for this minority award as a white woman, and I don't think I am a minority as a white woman. I think I am in an incredibly privileged position that I am in. Yeah, and I think that's what baffled me more than anything about that instance. And it definitely, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly on the whole women in whatever. like it needs to happen. Like it still needs to exist, obviously, but it's baffling to me that we still need it in 2024. And it just, I think what it does is it just shows us that even though there'll be a lot of people out there who think that, you know, so much has changed for women and we have so much, we've gained so much, well, it's not, it obviously it still isn't enough, because we need to have these things that are specifically targeted at us just to make ourselves feel seen within the business industry. So yeah, it's a very weird one.
And I feel like people get it kind of also almost spawns an anti-feminism view when you have women in marketing. It's like, well, we don't have men in marketing, and it's like, yeah, that's not the point. Like, you know, but so like it works weird in both directions. It's not just like a given. And also like the same conversation around having policy around the amount of men and women or whatever it is, and it's like, oh well, then are you just picking people based on their gender? And it's like, no, but like clearly there's a problem and we need to do something about it, and if we don't try and tackle it in any way or shape or form, like then nothing will happen. Like we will just continue doing what we were doing because that's the structure that's in, and that's the like status quo, I guess. So yeah, it trying to make a change almost also spawns an anti-change thing, which is weird.
No, it always does. It always does. It's like when you look at feminism throughout history, there is a moment where I think we could all get on board, you know, votes for women. Everyone's like, yep, that's great. And then there's kind of like, we've kind of gone into this like, you know, people refer to feminists now with a very unpleasant title, which I'm not going to say on this podcast, but people talk about, you know, this extreme view of feminism that almost damages, you know, the sort of stuff that we're talking about, you know, this kind of like really extreme, you are not allowed to live and breathe if you were a white straight man. And that is also not helpful, because it is not all like with all these things, it's not all men, it's not all women, but where this stuff does happen in pockets, we all have a responsibility, I think, just as humans, to hold people accountable for being dicks, which is what I think it is. It's like, I was thinking about this quite a lot, and I was thinking about the like, okay, what would I want a man to do for me? Like, you know, if we're in a meeting and a man talked over me or something like that, something quite straightforward that happens quite a lot. Do I want another man in the room to say, stop, mate, don't talk over her, and you need to listen? Or do I want to have the confidence to be like, listen, dude, I wasn't finished with what I'm saying yet? And actually, it's that. It's like, I want to have the confidence to feel like I can say no, and not to then be called a bitch behind my back or whatever. I don't know how you guys feel. What's like, because I think that's a good example of something that happens to us all the time, right? They're being talked over in a meeting. What would you like to happen in that scenario?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, because obviously it's lovely when you have male colleagues who recognize that there's a problem like that in a room, or, you know, in any professional capacity. And it's lovely when you realize that you have kind of like an ally and they're willing to speak up and say, no, this isn't acceptable. But then it's that balance, isn't it, between them then speaking for you. I don't know. I think personally for me, if someone did that, I wouldn't then kind of think any less of them or think that they were trying to speak for me. I would like to think that I wouldn't. But you know, that's me speaking as someone who is now fairly confident in speaking up in that situation anyway. I think it's probably something that is more apparent when you're in kind of the earlier stages of your career, or, you know, moving into management or senior levels as someone who's never been exposed to that environment before. Yeah, it's a hard one. I do think it's really important that men make it known, though, that they are aware of. So even if it's just someone saying to you afterwards, like, I'm really glad that you spoke up in that meeting, because that wasn't okay, that person was speaking like that to you, or something like that. But yeah, in an ideal world, it shouldn't come to that, should it? It shouldn't be that men have to speak for us. We should all feel empowered to just be like, this isn't good enough. And like you say, the risk is always that you get called emotional or a bitch or oversensitive or hormonal afterwards. And I think though when you get that kind of language used against you, it then makes you doubt yourself and you think, oh shit, am I being a bit oversensitive? I like, even now, like, I wasn't going to mention this because I don't want it to, you can cut this out, by the way, if you want to. But I am pregnant at the moment. So I'm like, sometimes I'm like, am I really hormonal today? Like, am I being a bit of a crazy bitch because my body is just in a very weird place at the moment? And like, I shouldn't think that way, you know, but it's because as women, we have these words used against us that self-doubt then creeps into your mind sometimes. And I think as well, like, you know, if you're an anxious person, for example, if you think at the end of the day and you start dwelling on things and you think, oh, should I have said that? Was that a bit oversensitive? And I think I speak, you know, I think about my husband, for example. He never has those kinds of conversations with himself at the end of the day. He never thinks like, oh God, was I a bit oversensitive today? So
But maybe we all should, right? Because we're all just in a state of human condition, and it's changing. And you know, men have hormone swings too, and you know, like maybe, you know, like when you're saying like, oh, would I like a man to speak up for me? No, you know what? It's just not okay to cut off each other in a meeting, regardless of what genders they are. And like, we just need to do better. It's a people issue, not a men and women issue, you know? So yeah, we can leave that bit in, by the way. We're not, well, the hater's gonna hate, right? They're gonna negate your entire opinion set because you're pregnant, but that's what it is.
Right now, wouldn't be doing this podcast normally.
You're gonna have your baby and then you're gonna be like, guys, take this down.
I don't normally have opinions. It's only like
I love that.
We must all be on we're either pregnant or all on our periods. Like, that must be it, guys.
Yeah.
That's what happens here.
No, I'm just hungover. That's good for anyone.
I'm just very tired of the patriarchy. I'm sorry, everyone. I'm just very tired. Obviously the question of us as senior female leaders in marketing, you know, and that, like, what do you think we should be doing to make sure that we support other female marketers? Because I think for me that's really important. So I'd love to hear from you guys what you guys think we should be doing.
So I was thinking about this one, and I feel like this is very pop culture of me to bring this up. But it made me think, if you watch the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders thing on Netflix, right, watch it first of all. It's like so trashy.
I've watched another documentary on them, which is why I didn't watch this one, but
really, yeah,
okay, maybe.
Oh, it's just great crap TV. And they're fabulous. Like, I think I could be a cheerleader, so you know. But I watched it. It made it, one of the things that it made me think about was the fact that these cheerleaders are obviously incredible athletes. They're all beautiful, and they exist in this world again that is dominated by men. You know, it's the NFL, and they still get paid. I think they say on the documentary they get paid something like the same as a Chick-fil-A worker. It's like they get paid, and half of them are like this, they have other jobs as well. One of them was a nurse. She was amazing. And I was talking to my husband when we were watching it, because these girls are still subject to that kind of criticism of, oh, your stomach's looking a little bit softer this season. You've gained a bit of weight in your face. But all the way through it, they act like the cheerleading world has come so far, and, you know, these women are so strong and they are strong, you know, they're incredible. Like, they are sports women. But this is an industry that is still, it is led by women in senior positions. But the impression that I got from this documentary was that it will continue to be this like really traditional, antiquated industry of women being criticized for their looks and, you know, paid really poorly compared to an NFL sportsman, should I say specifically. And it will never change, because these women that have moved up the ranks are not willing to challenge the system, because they're stuck in, they were cheerleaders, they lived that lifestyle, they have that traditional mindset still. And it just made me really sad, because I just thought that is not what women in power should be doing. It should be complete, that those women should be getting up there and saying, right, we want equal pay, and any woman of any size can be a Dallas, or can try out to be a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader. And, you know, if the girls should feel safe, and this, that, and the other. And I think that's our role as women in senior positions, to challenge the patriarchy, like you were saying, Emma, and to change things so that it's better for people who step into these roles after us, you know? It's a very weird, tenuous link there, but that really popped into.
Do you think part of the problem is because the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, their function is to please the male gaze, basically, which is why, you know, there has to be that rigor around it, maybe, and that tradition, because if you start stepping away from that, then maybe they're not going to be needed at all.
Yeah,
kind of thing.
And it is still something that it is clearly a very overly sexualized world that they are in. And, you know, there's no hiding behind that. I don't think they're trying to conceal that at all.
Yeah, because there's the, like, athletic competitive side of cheerleading, which is quite different now. But it's like two different worlds in that sense. Like, you know, there's the performative kind of entertaining side, and then there's like the competitive side. So yeah, but it's still interesting to know that they don't get paid well. Like, why can't they get paid well? Let's keep everything out. Why can't they get paid well? They clearly work really hard and need to uphold really high standards, even for what they look like, right? Like, when you're a model and you get paid well, you're getting paid to look a certain way, and that's a hit that you take because it's your job. But then you have to have a second job. Like, that's fucking shitty.
Yeah. And all of these, you know, these girls are kind of saying it as if they're like, yeah, we get paid really badly, but it's okay because I'm a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader. So it's almost like they've been trained to think that the way that it's fine. The glory isn't the pay or the success or whatever. It's the fact that they are a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader, probably in a very similar way that way back when Peggy got her job as the copywriter for Don Draper, she was probably paid shit, but it was fine because she was the first female copywriter at that firm. You know, they're still stuck back in that mindset, and that was the issue that I took with it, is that those women who have moved into positions of power should recognize that problem and now be saying, look, you know, outside of everything else, just pay the girls what they deserve.
Yeah. Also, it's not like you're lacking money. It's the fucking NFL.
It's the NFL.
Like, you're fine.
Yeah,
it's the equivalent of being like, this is a you know, like a SaaS startup that you work for or whatever, and it's like, you just got some funding, guys. Like, you can afford to pay your marketers properly. You can afford to pay. You can afford to promote people. You can afford to have these people in the room. I think, obviously we love the cheerleader analogy, but it's the same sort of principles, really, at the heart of it, isn't it?
Yeah. That's the thing that I wanted to bring up in terms of how can we help. And pay is a huge thing. So women tend to under ask and under negotiate their pay. So if we're mindful, so for example, I don't love negotiating for myself. Like, it's not fun for me. I don't like conflict, but it's much easier for me to do it for someone else. So the fact that I can be like, no, ask for more, or like, let's ask me for too much, and then I'm going to go and see how much I can get, and I'll come back, you know, just having that bit of open transparency to try and kick people up a few notches when it comes to pay and close that gap, I think is really important. And being open and honest about the pay situation, about the finances, and not kind of shying away from it. I think as a boss, if you're doing that with your people, you're going to be so much better off. And, you know, like, as the one and only Stuart Hearn says, take pay off the table. So help take pay off the table for other women and men in your team. You know, if you think someone's getting underpaid, like, it don't cost you nothing to fucking try and get their salary increased.
Totally. I always say to people, it's like, your career is the one space. Sorry, I always say, like, if I'm managing a team or whoever, like, the career is the one space in your life where I think you should just be totally incessantly selfish, you know, and just, if you believe in what you're negotiating and what you're asking for, ask for it. Like, don't be scared to ask for it. And that's, you know, like you said, Ruta, that goes for women and men. It is still something that is kind of like taboo to speak about, isn't it? Salaries and pay and things like that.
Women are not great at, you know, promoting themselves and advocating for themselves in this particular scenario. So yeah, if you're a female boss, your job is to do that. You know, your job is to kind of support your team to get what they deserve. And then if you are struggling to ask, I think, you know, I think this is one of the things, you know, they always say, don't they, like, men look at a CV or a job description and go, I can do two of those things, I'm going to apply for this job. And a woman goes, I can only do two of those things, I'm not going to apply. And that is because we are shit at promoting ourselves. But I always think, like, whenever I have conversations with people about, like, oh, I'm coming up to my annual review or whatever it might be, and like, I think I'm going to be able to ask for more money, like, just ask for it, just see what happens. Like, the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to say no, and then yes, they might be like, oh, hang on a sec, she asked for more money, like, what's that about? Right? And it might be because there's, like, you're not satisfied with your job, you're not getting development opportunities, you feel like you're not being taken seriously. It actually opens up an opportunity to have a lot more conversations that are probably beneficial to you in your career. So even if the answer to the pay rise is no, there is always a, yeah, but okay, I'm going to need some time to do learning and development, or I want a mentor, or I want more support, or whatever it is. And I think, yeah, as women, we have to get better at asking for those things. You know that you want them and you know that you need them, because we all do, doesn't matter what level you are. So the best way to go about getting that is to just be honest when you've got the opportunity to just ask for those things. Because trust me, your male colleagues are asking for that shit. So you should do the same.
By the way, if you work in marketing and you're not getting pay rises as you should be, marketing is one of the only departments that has budget that isn't just for people, but it has spending budget. So if your boss is refusing to give you a pay rise and they're not looking at a way to take it out of their spending budget and give it to you because you just, you know, you should be getting a pay rise, just be very wary of that, because that's red flags. Because if, you know, if somebody came to me and I truly had no money to give them more pay because I've run out of people side of money, I would just adjust my budget for spending and give you the money from that and spend a little bit less, which is to me always worth it. You know, no one's ever asking for like a 30k pay rise, you know. It's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6k. I can take that out of my yearly spend, easy peasy, and keep you here.
And I think it's like, if you don't know your boss has a marketing budget, ask the question. Like, I think people need to be more, and this isn't just women, like junior people or people who are looking to progress need to get more comfortable in asking commercial questions, because that information, your boss should be transparent about that information.
There are big red flags if they won't tell you how much your marketing budget is, and if they won't tell you how much money the company's made. That's a problem. I speak to somebody quite regularly who's in that situation. I'm like, wow, yeah, we need to get you out of there. So yeah, like crazy. Is there anything else that we would add after we've had our conversation that you think either we as female marketers, or, you know, just women in general, should be doing more for each other?
Should I just say lean into it? Like, we have really good skills and we are different from men in many ways, and that's a good thing. Like, use those things, you know, like the fact that we're maybe more emotional, overthink things. That's great in marketing, because guess what? You have to incite emotion usually in people. Just don't be afraid of those skills, because they're fucking useful. Like, there's a way to use them all.
Definitely. And I think I would just add that we shouldn't just feel like we have to be satisfied with what we've got so far, and to just feel like we can continue to push boundaries and break down barriers, and not reflect on the past 50 years and think, well, we've come so far, that'll do. You know, keep working away at it, keep chipping away at it, because there's still a lot. I mean, the data that you guys found for this conversation shows it in and of itself. You know, there's still a lot of work to be done to close those gaps between men and women in our industry. So yeah, just don't stop pushing.
You do not have to be grateful, I think. You know, that's it, isn't it? It's like you do not have to sit there and be like, thank you so much for giving me a job.
That.
Yeah.
Have a little bit of that white male Delulu energy.
Oh yeah.
Just, it'll take you far. Be aware of it, but it'll take you far.
Awesome.
Wonderful. Well, last question before we wrap up. Is there, I feel like this whole podcast was marketing gossip, but is there any marketing gossip that you'd like to share with us? So like anything you've seen that like has caught your eye or annoyed you, or that you really like, or any trends that are happening in marketing?
I don't know specifically. LinkedIn's annoying me this week, just generally. Like I have weeks where I love LinkedIn, and then this week's one of those weeks where it's just annoying me. I think there's a lot of bullshit on LinkedIn this week. So there's that. But that's just a
tough week for LinkedIn.
Tough week for LinkedIn when
it's because you're pregnant.
Oh, yeah, that'll be it.
You're just really hormonal, man.
Hormone.
They're just annoying you too
just hormonal this week.
I'm just being a bit oversensitive. Gossip wise, we're going to be launching something really exciting at Digital Off in the next few weeks. So, like, kind of shameless plug, but it is really cool. So, just encourage people to keep your eye out for that.
Lovely conversation, and yeah, so glad we were finally able to properly have it. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know, and hopefully we will see you all on blameitoonmarketing.com if you want to share any of your experiences, or if you want to do some marketing confessions or marketing gossip in there. So thank you very much, and we'll see you all next week.